180 days, 6 months, half a year. I want you to sit with that number for a moment, not rush past it, not hear it and immediately start calculating whether you have the time or the energy or the discipline to do anything meaningful with it. Just sit with it. 180 days. Because here is what I know about that number that most people never stop long enough to discover. 180 days is not just a period of time, it is a complete transformation cycle. It is the exact amount of time that separates the person who wishes their life were different from the person who has actually made it different. It is the distance between the version of you that exists right now and the version of you that is waiting on the other side of 6 months of genuine, focused, relentless commitment. And I need you to understand something about that version, the unstoppable version, the one that does not flinch when things get hard, that does not fold when the pressure rises, that does not accept the comfortable mediocrity of a life lived below its actual capacity. That version of you is not some distant, unattainable fantasy. It is not reserved for people with different circumstances or greater advantages or more favorable starting positions. It is simply the version of you that decides, really decides, not casually decides, not hopefully decides, but completely and irrevocably decides that 180 days from today, everything is going to be different, and then does the work every single day to make that true. But before I tell you what those 180 days look like, I need to tell you something honest. Something that most people who talk about transformation leave out because it is uncomfortable, and because the uncomfortable parts are the parts that actually matter. The reason your life looks the way it does right now is not bad luck. It is not unfair circumstances. It is not the fault of the people around you or the systems you live within or the timing of the world. Those things matter. Those things have influence, but they are not the reason. The reason your life looks the way it does right now is the accumulation of every daily choice you have made until this moment. Every morning you chose comfort over commitment. Every time you chose the easier option over the harder right thing. Every day you told yourself you would start tomorrow, and then tomorrow became the day after, and the day after became next week, and next week became someday, and someday became never. The accumulation of those choices is your current life, and that is not said to make you feel guilty. That is said to give you something far more valuable than guilt. It is said to give you power. Because if your current life is the accumulation of your past choices, then your future life is the accumulation of your choices from this day forward, and you are about to make the most important choice available to you. The choice to spend the next 180 days becoming unstoppable. Now let me tell you what those 180 days actually look like, because transformation at this scale does not happen randomly. It does not happen through vague intention or occasional effort, or the kind of motivation that burns bright for a week and disappears the moment real difficulty arrives. It happens through a structure. A deliberate, phase-by-phase, daily action-driven structure that builds on itself with every passing week until the person who started day 1 is genuinely unrecognizable to the person who reaches day 180. The first 60 days are about destruction, not the dramatic, burn everything down kind of destruction, the quiet, surgical, deeply intentional destruction of everything in your current life that is working against the person you are trying to become. Most people want to skip this phase. They want to go straight to the building. They want to add the good habits and the positive routines and the new behaviors without doing the harder work of identifying and removing what has been sabotaging them. And so they add new things on top of old foundations that are cracked and unstable, and that will eventually cause everything built on top of them to collapse. The first 60 days demand honesty. a level of honesty with yourself that most people avoid their entire lives because the truth it reveals is uncomfortable, and the implications of that truth are demanding. What habits are you maintaining right now that are actively working against the life you want? Not the obvious ones, not just the ones that are easy to acknowledge and socially acceptable to admit to, the hidden ones, the ones you have been pretending are not as harmful as they are, because addressing them would require a change you are not sure you're ready to make. What relationships in your life are keeping you anchored to the old version of yourself? The people who, conscious or not, are invested in you staying exactly where you are because your change would challenge something in them. The people whose conversations consistently pull you back toward the past rather than forward toward the future. The people you love, but who are not helping you become who you need to become. What beliefs about yourself have you been carrying that are simply not true? The story that you are not the kind of person who succeeds at this. The narrative that it is too late or you are too far behind or you don't have what it takes. The comfortable lies you have been telling yourself that justify staying exactly where you are. In the first 60 days, you destroy all of it. Not perfectly, not all at once, but with the daily, consistent intention of someone who understands that you can't build an unstoppable life on a foundation that is actively working to stop you. Remove the habits, reduce the relationships that are anchoring you back, release the beliefs that are lying to you about what is possible. Clear the ground. Because what you build in the next 120 days needs solid ground to stand on. The second 60 days are about construction. This is the phase that most people think transformation is entirely about. The building phase, the adding phase, the positive, forward-moving, habit-stacking, daily routine-building phase that produces the visible evidence of change. And they're right that it matters. They're just wrong that it can happen without the first 60 days having done their work. But now that the ground is clear, now that the habits and the relationships and the beliefs that were working against you have been addressed, the second 60 days are about deliberately, intentionally, brick by brick, constructing the architecture of the unstoppable person. What does that architecture look like? It looks like a physical practice, a daily commitment to moving your body and feeding it and resting it with the same seriousness that you would bring to any other investment in your future. Because everything else you are trying to build happens inside a body, and a body that is neglected and depleted and running on inadequate sleep and poor nutrition is a body that cannot support the kind of sustained, high-quality effort that becoming unstoppable requires. It looks like a mental practice, a daily commitment to feeding your mind with the knowledge and the perspectives and the ideas that the unstoppable version of you needs to operate. Reading, learning, thinking deeply and deliberately about the things that matter, protecting your mind from the noise and the negativity and the constant stimulation that scatters your thinking and depletes your cognitive resources before the important work even begins. It looks like a discipline practice, a daily commitment to doing the hard thing, the specific, most important, highest value action that moves you toward the life you are building. Every single day. Not when you feel motivated, not when conditions are perfect. Every day as a non-negotiable expression of who you have decided to become. And it looks like an identity practice, a daily, conscious, deliberate decision to see yourself as the person you are becoming rather than the person you have been. To make choices that are consistent with that identity even before you fully feel it. To act as if it is already true, because acting as if it is already true is precisely how it becomes true. The second 60 days are hard, not because the actions themselves are impossible, but because the gap between the old patterns and the new ones is still wide enough that every day feels like a battle between who you were and who you are becoming. Every day the old way calls. Every day the comfortable, familiar mediocrity of before extends its invitation to return. And every day you refuse, not dramatically, quietly, with the simple, daily, unchosen-looking choice to show up for the person you have decided to become. The third 60 days are about acceleration. By the time you reach day 121, something has happened that you may not have fully noticed while it was happening, something subtle but profound. The battle between the old you and the new you has quietly shifted. The new patterns that required enormous effort in the first 60 days of construction have become more natural. The identity you were practicing in week 5 has started to feel more real than performed. The daily actions that felt like discipline in month 2 have started to feel like simply what you do. You have reached the phase where transformation stops being something you are trying to do and starts being something you are actually living. And in that shift, in that moment when the new way starts to feel more natural than the old way, something extraordinary becomes possible. Acceleration. Not the incremental progress of the first 4 months, where every gain was hard-won and the evidence of change was real but modest. Explosive, compounding, almost impossible to believe acceleration, where the foundation of 120 days of consistent work suddenly produces results that seem disproportionate to the effort of any single day. This is the compound effect made visible. This is what 60 days of removing what was not working and 60 days of building what does work looks like when it reaches critical mass. In the third 60 days, the skill you have been practicing makes a leap that months of earlier work prepared but did not yet produce. The body you have been building starts to look like the result of 6 months of commitment rather than 6 weeks. The business or the career or the creative work you have been doing daily suddenly catches the attention of people and opportunities that were not present before. The financial habits that seemed to produce nothing for months suddenly show up in your bank account in ways that make the first 4 months of sacrifice feel like the best investment you ever made. And more than any external result, in the third 60 days, you stop feeling like someone who is trying to become unstoppable and start feeling like someone who is. The fear that used to stop you has not disappeared, but it has shrunk to a size you can act in spite of without tremendous effort. The doubt that used to paralyze you is still there sometimes, but it no longer has the authority over your choices that it once had. The hard days are still hard, but they are no longer capable of making you question whether the whole thing is worth it. You know it is worth it, not because someone told you, because 120 days of living it has shown you. And that knowledge, earned through experience rather than adopted through hope, is the most unshakable foundation an unstoppable person can stand on. Now let me talk about what separates the people who complete all 180 days from the people who start with full intention and fall away somewhere in the middle. Because people will fall away, most will, not because they are weak or uncommitted or fundamentally different from the people who finish, but because they did not prepare for what the middle feels like. The middle of 180 days is not the inspired beginning. It is not the visible, accelerating end. It is the quiet, unremarkable, often unglamorous middle where the initial excitement has completely faded, and the dramatic results have not yet arrived, and the daily work just has to be done because it has to be done. Not because it feels good, not because progress is obvious, not because anyone is watching or celebrating or particularly impressed. Just because you said you would, just because the commitment you made to yourself on day 1 is still standing, just because the person you are becoming depends on the person you are today doing the thing that needs to be done. That is the middle, and most people cannot survive it, not because it requires superhuman discipline, but because they did not decide deeply enough on day one. They committed to the idea of the transformation without fully committing to the reality of it. And when the reality arrived, stripped of the inspiration and the novelty and the early momentum, it was harder than the idea had been, and the idea had been what they committed to. Commit to the reality, not the idea of becoming unstoppable, the actual, daily, ordinary, sometimes boring, always demanding reality of it. The reality of showing up when you don't feel like it, of doing the work when the work produces nothing visible, of staying in the process long enough for the process to produce what only patience and persistence can produce. Commit to that. On day one, before the middle arrives, before the difficulty tests the depth of your decision. Make the decision so complete and so real and so thoroughly yours that the middle cannot shake it. Because the people who make it through the middle are the people who reach the end, and the people who reach the end of 180 days of genuine, sustained, daily action-driven commitment to becoming unstoppable discover something that no amount of reading or listening or thinking about transformation can give them. They discover who they actually are when they decide to be, and it is more than they imagined. It is always more than they imagined. 180 days, 6 months, half a year. That's all the distance between who you are right now and who you are capable of being. The question is not whether the transformation is possible. It is, without question, without exception. For you specifically, with your specific circumstances and your specific challenges and your specific starting point. The question is whether you are willing to make the decision, not the hopeful kind, not the try and see kind, the complete, irrevocable, I am doing this regardless of what it costs kind. Make that decision today and let the next 180 days show you exactly who you have always been capable of becoming.